rotations and combinations. That's really the only takeaway from night one of the Utah Jazz preseason. And we do it next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. On today's show, we'll look back at Friday night's game against the New Zealand Breakers. We'll look at the rotations and combinations that Will Hardy used predominantly and what they might mean. There's not a lot to take away from that game. I'll explain why, except for one player made me wonder if he's going to be another Jazz G League success story. We'll touch on that, plus some interesting things about pace of play and some of the ways that we saw Will use some other players. That's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as on YouTube. Please subscribe or follow. It's free. We'd love to have you aboard. And thank you very much for everyone who reached out while I was dark there for a little bit, had some personal issues we had to take care of. And so apologize for that. It's not something I've ever done before, but was necessary. So thank you very much. As I said on the show that I did Sunday bonus, but I don't know how many people saw it. There is a Sunday bonus episode if you want to go back, just kind of recapping the first week of camp and summer content day. Some of us have been together for weeks. Most of us have been together for years, some 5, some 10, some 20, some as many as 30. So I got a bunch of reach outs from people, and I really did appreciate it. I understood where it was coming from, even the ones that sounded angry. But I got it, and I appreciated it, and I thank you very much. It actually meant a whole lot to me. So let's get to it. The Jazz started Keyonte. Oh, by the way, today's show is brought to you in part by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you can start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Jazz Rockets tonight, 7 o'clock. SEG Plus, available on Jazz Plus or on SEG Plus if you have not gotten the streaming service yet. Plus Tuesday's hockey game available on SEG Plus. That's your streaming for all the hockey and all the basketball games this year. So the Jazz started with Keyonte George, Collin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Taylor Hendricks, and Walker Kessler. So this matches a little bit of the messaging that we've gotten out of the first week of camp, which is a very clear direction of developing the young players. So that is 3 of the 7 players who are 23 years or younger and playing on the floor at the same time, and 2 of the players that are 20 years old or younger. And then the next group that came in was Isaiah Collier, another youngster, Cody Williams, another youngster, Jordan Clarkson, Bryce Sensabaugh, another youngster, and John Collins. So those were the 10 that were in the rotation, and impressively, that's 7 of the youngsters. That's all 7 of them, which I didn't entirely think you could get, or 6 of them, right? It's 6 of them. Filipowski's not in there. 6 of them, which I didn't actually think you could get done, and I'll explain why. And I'm still not sure you can, but you did. They did in the preseason. So Will already had some interesting comments about the combinations afterwards. First off, he talked about Collin and Key having some experience together. It's checkered experience, but it's checkered. They played together last year a decent amount. Late in the year, the numbers were just atrocious. Defensively, it was just really, really bad last year. And so I don't know, that was last year. And I like, if they're going to play together and their liability is defensively, then having positional size like Lauri Markkanen and Taylor Hendricks and Walker Kessler with them might be the answer. They're a good combination, Key and Collin together, just offensively, how they play together, what each of them does. They both, I think, support each other's skill sets. Keyonte becomes the primary ball handler. Collin can be an off-ball dynamo, which is where he's at his greatest. So that makes a lot of sense. In fact, it's frankly hard to envision that, unless we have injuries, that something else is going to be our starting lineup. This, just when you saw it out there, and where the organization and the team is directed, it just makes too much sense. Now, at some point along the way, you may have to adjust but starting here seems like the right spot. The second unit was interesting to me, and I don't know that this is totally sustainable. It's Isaiah Collier with Cody Williams, with the veteran presence of Jordan Clarkson, and then Bryce Sensabaugh with John Collins. Collier, Cody Williams, Jordan Clarkson, and Bryce Sensabaugh all together is really 4 guards. I mean, Bryce Sensabaugh played point guard at the end of the night. With John Collins, who's really a power forward defensively. And there's 2 things that the Jazz, I think, like to believe in. One is positional size. So on this 5-7, it doesn't work. But the other is switchability. So Isaiah Collier is strong enough and Cody Williams is long enough and Bryce is physical enough that actually they probably can switch pretty well. And maybe that's where this works, is that switchability. But I will say, I kind of feel like at some point Drew Eubanks is in there, John Collins slides to the 4, and 3 of those 4 guards are playing. But it was interesting afterwards when Will Hardy said that he really likes Isaiah Collier and Jordan Clarkson together, that he says Isaiah plays with pace and has a willingness to get off the ball early, put a little pressure on the rim, and that fits Jordan Clarkson's style well. So that seems to be a really conscious connection between those 2 by Will Hardy to have Isaiah Collier and Jordan Clarkson together. Cody Williams is really interesting to me when you watch him play because he's so long that when he does switch, he's dwarfing the other team's guards. Now, New Zealand is super small. So he certainly looked good. The one other thing that Will Hardy said that I thought was worth kind of mentioning in here was that he really liked Taylor and Lauri together defensively. And the reason is because Taylor can guard the perimeter defender while Lauri can guard the 4. Now, frankly, I don't know how different a 3 and a 4 are in this day and age, but in theory, the 3 is putting the ball on the deck a little bit more and attacking, and Taylor has to guard off the dribble where Lauri doesn't have to guard off the dribble. Both of them are going to have to come back and rebound. Neither of them have shown a propensity to be particularly good rebounders for their size. And one of Taylor's great strengths is in college was weak side shot blocking, and he showed it a little bit last year. So he'll have to have some kind of presence of that. The thing that's still interesting about Taylor, and I think going to be hard for us at times this year, is his game doesn't force itself yet onto the game, if that makes sense. I don't know if that sentence makes any sense. He doesn't have a skill set where he can just command something out of the game. So the other night against New Zealand, I think he's 10 minutes in. He's just zeros across the board. Then he gets a leak out dunk, and then he makes a nice play. He's going to have to create some of his own stuff. And it might actually be easier in an NBA game than against New Zealand, who kind of was guarding everyone straight up. Where if they're suddenly they're helping off, they know the personnel well enough, so they're helping off, and he can slice and create some opportunities for himself, then I think Taylor will be able to get some things on the board. But Taylor's going to have to get 2 field goals a night off, 1 field goal a night off an offensive rebound, 1 or 2 out of a leak out, 1 or 2 out of a back cut, and then hit a few threes. Or else his box scores are going to be really quiet. Overall on that night, it was a strange to be playing. They started camp on Tuesday, basically. Guys have been in town for a long time, and there's been a great commitment from players to be here, but they started camp on Tuesday. So to play on Friday was a little strange. And I would also say, and Ron kept talking about this in the broadcast, New Zealand executed really well and played really hard. So it actually turned out, I think, to be a really good scrimmage test for the Jazz, in that New Zealand came out in a 5-out set with a lot of three-point shooting and some pick actions that I don't think the Jazz are going to see very often. And I'm pretty certain they didn't do a huge amount of game planning specifically for New Zealand. So guys had to really react and stay on it and communicate a little bit. And I thought the competitiveness of the game was really good. After that, my individual player takeaways, which we'll get to next, are not a ton, other than I wonder if Johnny Juzang is the next Georges Niang or maybe even Joe Ingles. We touch on it next as we continue on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy. Located in Woods Cross and in Logan, The Murdocks have been in Utah for over 80 years, bringing you great customer service. They like to refer to the no regrets experience. You leave, you have no regrets that you worked with the Murdocks. In fact, maybe even better, you know that you got that person who's so concerned about how you're going to talk about them at the grocery store and what the experience are, because that's what the Murdocks are. They're a member of the community. And then you got the Chevy trucks, the Silverado and the Colorado. They're just getting you ready for the winters. It's right around the corners. The colors change. The trucks are there waiting for you. The SUV lineup of Chevy's incredible. The Suburban, the Tahoe. Those are the Utah County assault vehicles you know and love. Plus, they've got some great other things going on as well with the Volt, the Trax, the Equinox, and the Blazer, the Trailblazer. Go check it out at Murdock Hyundai, located in Woods Cross, also located in Logan. We can get you that VIP experience, so make sure you email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com to get your first-class experience at Murdock Chevy. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is also brought to you by BetterHelp. If you're looking to get some therapy, convenient, flexible online therapy, visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. Why therapy? I like to talk about it as performance enhancement. You go to the gym to get a little stronger, you eat right to live a little longer, you read to get a little smarter. Well, BetterHelp is here to help you improve your brain and your understanding of your actions. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears. Do a little performance enhancing of your mind and your brain and get a better understanding. It's BetterHelp. So overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Thanks so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. Pretty cool. Saturday, the Jazz went up to Hill Air Force Base. John Collins was born there. It was his first time back. Cody Williams is from a military family as well. So that was a pretty neat little interchange for both those guys to be up there, and the Jazz doing such great things in the community. Speaking of great things, I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but Ryan and Ashley Smith and the Smith Entertainment Group with the concession prices this year at Delta Center for both hockey and basketball, just awesome. I mean, there has been just such an amazing effort to make sure that the customer service, the customer experience, the fan experience is at an elite level since Smith and Entertainment Group took over. It's absolutely fabulous to see what they've done, how they've done it, and the commitment is just, I can tell you by being inside the building, the commitment's sincere and real, and we see it all the time. So I keep saying that I wouldn't take a lot of takeaways away from this game. So let me just run down a few of the players. Like Keyonte, I thought looked good, and there's no question he's playing with more confidence. Will's talked about how the communication between Keyonte and he are different than a year ago. I think he has something in his back pocket that now lets him know that he belongs. But he was being guarded by a 5'11" guard. Like, it's just not something that you can say like, oh, well, that matches. He looked good. He looked in control. I thought he played a little bit more pace. I'll talk about that before we're done today. And I thought, really in a lot of ways, that was super to see. Bryce did some interesting things. He played a little point guard. And I thought he looked good throughout the night. I'm really excited to see Bryce this year and see if he can shoot it. See if he can improve from last year. Just of all the guys who just seemed kind of like uncertain and uncomfortable, Bryce, to me, never matched his talent level. We saw shines of Keyonte and shines of Taylor, but we didn't ever see Bryce at the level that we could have seen him. I'm excited to see him get that opportunity. He's leaned up his body. He looks better. And I thought Will Hardy's comment that we might want him to play with the ball in his hands a little bit because then he can get smaller guys on him he can bully is interesting. The other thing I would say on Bryce, though, the biggest thing he has to do is learn how to not bully. His college game was based on bullying people, and you can't bully the NBA. And so he's leaned down. He's going to have to use his skill and his quickness. And he says he feels much better sliding defensively. And so I think that'll be interesting. Tonight will be a good one. Like if he gets a Tari Eason on him or he's going up against Jalen Green or some of the Rockets guys, I think you'll get to really see something that's worthwhile. But again, the thing that was most noticeable when I was on the floor before the New Zealand Breaker games, they were just so small. And a bunch of really good basketball players who played collegiate basketball at South Dakota State and Davison and things like that, they just all and some of them have sniffed the NBA. Mooney had played some 5 games for the Cavaliers and the Knicks, but they just all were just – there's a reason why we have size and measurement in this league. On the rookies, I generally give, particularly early, I'm going to give them huge passes. It's super hard to play when your heart's bouncing out of your chest. The comment I've made about Cody Williams, and I think you'll hear more than you ever want, and it may be somewhat ridiculous, is that when Michelangelo talks about the David, he talks about that he didn't do anything. It was inside the granite. He just had to chip away the granite to go find the David. David's right there. I feel like that's what Cody Williams' story is going to be, is just, can we chip away at the granite? And there's going to be moments where you're not chipping away at the granite, and then you are. His dunk got a lot of publicity, the thing on it's a 1-foot dunk through traffic, and he can do that. Well, there aren't just a lot of guys that can do that. And he just gets off the ground really fast. He doesn't have an electrifying first step like a Collin Sexton or anything, so he's going to have to be doing this mostly on the weak side, where the ball swings, the defender's a step late to get there, and then he goes to work. And I think that's, we'll see that. And then over time, he's going to have to learn how to slide and open himself up and do things for that. He does have a little bit of a first step, like a little, at least in college, I saw him split some double teams and do some things. That's what I really, really liked about Cody when I watched his collegiate tape, was that I think I've told this story a lot. He splits a double team, and he comes through and he throws the ball into like the third row. And he was just too fast at that moment. So I'm not entirely sure. It's not that he doesn't have the first step. I don't know that he's learned how to control that burst. That he comes out of that burst and he's a little out of control, and he's probably playing still to not make mistakes at this point. And so that would be kind of the thing I would watch on Cody a little bit. The only other note I have for you is that Lauri is really, really, really good. Okay, we knew that. And that was a terrible, unfair mismatch, but a cool night for Lauri, his coach. First player ever assisted on a Finnish national team was the head coach for New Zealand. So that was good to see. So, again, I thought it was a really competitive game, and I thought that New Zealand style gave some difficulty. And so I thought for kind of an opening scrimmage, it worked really, really well. And then tonight you get the Rockets, who are really pretty good. And it's interesting because, like, the one thing on the Rockets and we'll talk about this tomorrow, is, Justin Zanuck says, hey, we're not going to go 6 for 6 or 7 for 7. I look at the Rockets, like, did they hit on Alfred Sengun at the 16th pick? They may have hit on Jalen Green at the second. These are easier picks. The second pick. Jabari Smith's the third pick they might have hit. Amon Thompson's the fourth pick they might have hit. Tari Easton's the 17th pick of the 2022 draft. Did they hit? Like, is there a chance they've gone 5 for 5 and maybe even 6 for 6 with Reed Sheppard? Now, they have a second pick, a third pick, a fourth pick, and a third pick. So you better freaking hit. And we're doing it in the 9th and the 10th and in the 16th. It's a little harder to hit on everything, and certainly harder to hit when you're down. And they have Cam Whitmore as the 20th. I mean, and he looks – a lot of their guys feel like they're going to hit right now. To their credit, they have a really good front office. It's going to be interesting to see Reed Sheppard. He was my favorite player in the draft. There's a lot of questions on the Rockets of whether Jalen Green's explosion was related to Alfred Sengun going out. And then they had that big win streak. So they're going to come to play a little bit. This is, I believe, their first preseason game. And so, we'll get that good first half of basketball and then get to see a bunch of guys in the second half of this one. Johnny Juzang jumped out to me as guys who played particularly well. We'll talk about what I saw from Johnny and where this might actually talk about the rotation. He's not in that first 10. I had Eubanks at 11. Is Johnny Juzang going to force himself into some time on this basketball team? We'll talk about it next. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Great deal for you right now with FanDuel. Here's how it works. You make that first $5 bet, and then FanDuel is going to bonus bet you to make sure that you've got some more fun to play with. $200 guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So the start of the NFL season is underway, and it's time for big returns from America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. As I mentioned, a $200 bonus bet for you when you place your first $5 bet. If you go to the FanDuel Sportsbook, Monday Night Football coming up with the Saints and the Chiefs tonight. The Chiefs are a 5.5-point favorite to stay undefeated, along with the Minnesota Vikings. What are the Super Bowl odds all of a sudden, I wonder, on the NFL as we get going with all these teams suddenly making these, are we actually going to buy into the New England, the Minnesota Vikings as a possibility? Nope. Chiefs are plus 500. Niners plus 700 despite their loss. Ravens plus 750. Texans plus 1,100. Lions plus 1,100. And Bills plus 1,100 as well. And all the next week's action is there for you. Major League Baseball continues today with the Guardians, against the Tigers, but the Tigers are favored in Cleveland today. The Yankees are favored against the Royals. The Phillies are favored against the Mets, and the Padres are favored against the Dodgers. Everyone's a 1.5. That's kind of how it works. But the Dodgers, that's interesting. By the way, that Padre-Dodger game, I think, is still Tuesday because they played last night. Johnny Juzang was the story of preseason game number 1 for the Utah Jazz. Johnny Juzang had 19 points. He shot 7 of 9. He shot 5 of 6 from 3. But you know the thing that's interesting about Johnny Juzang is he was the best three-point shooter on the Jazz last year. Johnny Juzang, in not a lot of time, but 4 threes per game, playing 19 minutes in 20 games, shot 42% for the Jazz last year from 3. Juzang, a year before, shot 24% from 3. And if you go back and look at Juzang's career, he starts at Kentucky. He then spends 2 years at UCLA, and he's really a mid-range shooter. He takes 150 threes kind of per year, which is not nothing. It's 3 a game. And he shoots him at like 35%. So it wasn't but he really, his forte on his way to 16 points a game was kind of playing in that mid-range. And then Jazz signed him to back-to-back two-way contracts. And in the offseason, the Jazz give him his first full contract in the NBA. And this year he is signed to a multi-year, 4-year deal. I believe only the first year is guaranteed. Ron Boone said the first thing that happens here is you just relax. So you look at Juzang, he's not an elite, incredible athlete, but he's 6'7", 215, which is a pretty nice kind of body to look at. His path here jumps out to me as both got a little Joe Ingles to it and a little Georges Niang to it. So the first thing is he's just worked on his shot at such an incredible level, and it is coming out so quickly. So he has become an elite, quick-release three-point shooter. Elite in the speed by which it gets off. So at 6'7", he kind of always has a shooting window. It's a set shot. It's just coming out super quickly, and it's going in. If you look back at Joe Ingles, you're like, well, what do you mean? Well, one of the things I think we all forget about Joe Ingles, remember the story about him going to Clipper camp, getting cut, and the Jazz picking him up. What we don't remember is that he was in Warriors camp 4 years before that, somebody else's camp 4 years before that, and he kept not making it and then going back to play in Europe. Georges Niang, the Jazz have in the G League for 2 years, and Georges Niang, similar to Johnny Juzang, was I think at the time was the all-time leading scorer in the history of Iowa State. Maybe Fred Hoiberg, but Niang's like 1 or 2. But Niang played a down-low post-game, taking, again, about 2 or 3 threes a game by the end of his senior year, averaged 21 points a game, but he was a post player. And when he comes out of college in 2016, he goes to Indiana, so Juzang, and plays like 23 games, and then he's into the G League. And he only plays 9 NBA games in 17-18. And he doesn't really become an NBA player until the 18-19 season. So it's 3 seasons past the time he gets out of college. It's exactly the same timeline that Johnny Juzang has going on here. And Niang is 6'7", 230. Their bodies are incredibly similar. Their paths are similar in that they had found a way to score and make a living and be successful in one manner, and then they had to find a new way to do it. in the NBA. It took them some time, and they used their time as a two-way player in the G League to be able to figure that out and then make progress. And then if you look at Niang, he comes into the league, and then in his first year where he gets time, 59 games, he plays 9 minutes a night. He's not young, but he shoots 41% from three. In his two previous years, he was 1 of 16. And then in the 18-19 season, he goes and shoots 41% from three on 105 threes. Not a lot, but again, he's playing 8 minutes a night. He then goes up to 900 minutes a night. He shoots 40% again, and then he gets the 72 games playing every game of the NBA season for the Jazz before leaving the Jazz, shooting 43% on nearly 300 threes. So it still took Niang like 2 or 3 more years to get to where he needs to, but this is the path that Johnny Juzang is on. Now, right now, he's probably the 12th guy on the roster, but he goes and shoots 40% from three, and we get a few injuries, and he gets the opportunity. Maybe it's only 9 minutes a night, but his career path right now is following exactly that path of what we see out of Georges Niang, and and it's exciting for Johnny. And I thought the Ron Boone comment that, the thing that's most noticeable is just how much more confidence he's just in comfort he has because he knows he has a guaranteed deal. All right, last one for you. Here's something I'm really curious to watch this year. And that is the Jazz pace of play. So last year, after a made basket, we were 26 in the league at crossing half court. The difference here is super small. And we were 29th in the league in getting into our first action. This, I think, was because, one, Keonte for most of the year was learning how to play the game. And two, for the second half of the year, Keyonte was tired. So I'm curious to see where we go this year with our possession length or how quickly we get into actions. So the two numbers I'm talking about there are crossing half court and getting to your first action. We are 26th in the league in crossing half court. We are 29th in the league in getting to our first action. If you look at us on pace, we were slow, or we were middle of the pack after a miss, and we were pretty slow after a make. I think that's what Will Hardy told me he would like to see, is that we're organized and structured after a make, but that we go after a miss. But it will be interesting to see on crossing half court and first action whether Keonte's confidence, Isaiah Collier's push, whoever else is playing point guard, picks us up a little bit. On the defensive end, the reason we weren't a slow pace of play team is because on the defensive end, teams scored or used their possession the fastest against us after a make and the fastest overall in the league. So our defense didn't put up a lot of resistance. People got to their first action, beat us off it, and got going, as we did not have a very good defensive year. So one of the things you can do is if you, frankly, play a little bit more resistance defensively or taking the ball out of the net less, you're going to be able to push maybe a little bit more and get us into actions. But I think that's one that I'll keep an eye on this year and watch during training camp is what is our pace of play and how quickly are we into actions and whether or not the confidence of Keonte allows us to get into those faster. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Great to be back. Thank you again for everyone who reached out and asked what was going on. I appreciate your support and our connection. I do feel very connected to all of you, so I greatly appreciate that. It's been a fun run. We'll continue it. Back with you tomorrow, Reaction to the Ballgame Plus. I have Michael Smith and Thurl Bailey interviews I did a few weeks ago that I wasn't able to get to, so I'm excited to share those with you. That's all coming up this week on Locked On Jazz. In addition, for those of you who want more, Locked On NBA is still going daily. Go check it out. And if you're on video, we'll send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. Have a great one.